Tonight, I will be telling 6 stories, starting things off with a story involving the deep web, and moving into tales involving ghostlights, creepy neighbors, tales of camping, and more. A huge thank you to the incredible authors who allowed this video to be possible. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. Likes and comments are always appreciated if you enjoy. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Also, really quick, I wanted to say thank you guys for 60,000 subscribers. I never would have imagined this channel would come this far. I really enjoy what I do. I'm really appreciative that you guys continue to support the channel. It makes me really excited to see what we can do in 2020. I plan on keeping the channel going for as long as I can, continuing to just do what I do, and your guys' support means the world to me. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. A few weeks ago, I was reading some articles about the dark web. I found it intriguing and the thought of the unknown drew me in. The fact there is so much hidden content in the dark web made me want to attempt to go on it, so I did. I found a guide on how to access the part of the internet, and I followed every step, although there were only a few. Download Tor, check. Download a VPN, check. Find .onion links, check. I thought, was that really all there was to it? Just that easy? I gained access to the deeper parts of the web through the browser Tor. It was boring at first because there wasn't too much to look at, just a blank page. I knew it wasn't like the regular web. I had to find specific links to type in. I found a wiki page full of .onion links before I got started. So, I looked through to find something interesting. I wasn't on the dark web to buy anything or do anything illegal. I just wanted to look. My curiosity got the better of me. The links didn't have descriptions on what they were about, so I had to take my chances with whichever one I'd type in. I copy and pasted a link that seemed a bit creepy, mainly because I was alone and wanted to scare myself, while I waited for my girlfriend to get home. I hit enter and the page loaded. It was a pitch black page with small white text written on the left bottom corner. It was so tiny I couldn't even read it. The text then started to slowly get bigger, finally enough to where I could read it. "Be careful what you click on," it wrote. Okay, weird, I thought. I clicked out of the link and moved on down the list of links. I copy and pasted another. The page loaded up. It was a black and red page with a text box saying, "Enter name." It looked like it was a computer game. "Alexa," I typed into the box. Another text box showed up, this time saying, "Last name too." Okay, I know what you all think. You must be stupid to give your full name over the dark web. Yes, I know. And yes, I was. That is where it all went wrong. "More," I typed into the computer. Inside, I felt a bit nervous. I was wondering why I even gave it my real name. Like, who does that? I could have entered a fake name. It looked like it was a harmless game. What could happen? Some animation started after I hit enter. It was a man chasing a woman around in a house with a knife. A body of text that said, "Your objective is to not get killed, Alexa. It can happen in a matter of seconds. You cannot hide from us. We will always be watching." I hated that those words sounded like they were directed at me. It was a little nerve-wracking, especially because after those words, I saw my name being typed in over the woman running from the knife, let alone my name being on the screen. I wasn't even able to control anything in the game. It was just another video I was watching, and it seemed to replay every time the woman was killed. As the video played, the woman started to look more like me. It was crazy. I was sitting there watching an animated version of myself being murdered over and over again. The last replay of the video had the woman with her legs cut off and bleeding out on the floor, and the killer left. Strange enough, more words began to appear on the screen. "We're almost to you, Alexa. We can't wait to meet you." My heart began to race. What the hell was that about? I thought, it's nothing. I'm perfectly fine. I tried to close out of the page and it kept giving me an error message. I tried 3 more times. All said the same thing. Error, cannot exit. I reset my computer, hoping that it would take care of everything. I didn't pick my computer back up to check. I still felt too creeped out. I guess that's what I wanted, right? My girlfriend was supposed to get home soon, so I went downstairs to the kitchen to get dinner started. I poured myself a glass of wine to calm myself after watching myself die repeatedly. I'm never going to go back on the dark web again. That freaked me out way too much, and besides, I'm not sure if I was even using it correctly. The VPN I downloaded seemed a bit sketchy. I didn't have to pay for it, and it kept cutting in and out, leaving minutes at a time unsecured. I hear the door open, thinking it was my girlfriend. I got excited. It's been a long day and I wanted to share what had happened with her. I heard footsteps. I called out, "Honey, I'm in the kitchen." I didn't hear her voice. Normally she announces when she's home. I started to get a bit worried and walked towards the front door. It was wide open with no one there. I felt a pit of anxiety in my stomach. I ran back to the kitchen in an attempt to grab a weapon to protect myself with. I was looking for the butcher knife in the knife block. With little to no avail. That was the only knife missing. I heard footsteps again. So I grabbed one of the knives and booked it upstairs. I went into my bedroom, turned the lights off, and locked the door. "We're always watching you, Alexa Moore." What a naive thing to do. Entering your full name on the dark web, unprotected. We found you in a matter of seconds. You know how quickly and how easily it was to find your location? Remember the game you played? That's going to quickly become your reality. I heard in a deep voice. My heart dropped. I was afraid of what was going to happen next. The next thing I knew, I was knocked cold on the floor. I woke up maybe 45 minutes later due to excruciating pain. Blood everywhere, pain, and more pain. My vision was blurry from tears. I looked down and I saw my legs torn from my body. All I could think about besides my pain was my girlfriend. Where was she? Is she alive? I couldn't see or hear anyone. I was hoping whoever did this was gone. They must have taken my limbs because I didn't see them on the floor. I started to hear the sound of faint sirens, getting louder as they came closer. A few minutes later, a rush of paramedics and police came into my room. I was lifted onto a gurney and carried downstairs. That is where I saw my girlfriend on the floor, bleeding out. Before I was taken outside into the ambulance, I saw them close her eyes. I knew what that meant. My heart broke even more inside. Once I was inside the ambulance, everything went black. The penetrating cold of the dark winter night and the howling northern winds are, no doubt, things that people try to avoid. Staying cozy inside their well-heated homes, cuddling with their loved ones, and sharing cups of hot beverages. And yet, for the northerners, facing these unwelcoming conditions is part of the daily routine. You get used to it in time. I would never say that it becomes a pleasure, but it is definitely something that you can live with and be relatively content. You do need, however, to find ways to make yourself warmer, to keep the cold outside. It is therefore relevant to emphasize that here in Finland, we have infused the sauna with all our daily activities. It is often the case that we make arrangements for sauna sessions almost every day, and usually, every individual house is equipped with one. If you want to feel warm inside, and so comfortable that you feel confident that you can battle the Nordic winter wearing just a towel around your waist, you have sauna time to give you the feeling. Well, that and alcohol, but that's another story. It was then a very big benefit when me and some of my students were on a field trip and learned that we could book the facility sauna for 1.5 hours straight. You see, sauna may be a tradition of Finland, but sauna sessions with friends are much more heartwarming, and it is rare that you can book it for more than 45 minutes, or an hour if you are lucky. So 1.5 hours sounded like Christmas came early. I'm a university professor, and I teach earth sciences in a university here in Finland. This includes a mixture of geography, geology, and climatology. For the sake of anonymity of my students, I will not mention which faculty I belong to. They can decide to reveal their identities themselves, if they ever stumble upon this. Part of the course is a non-compulsory visit to one of the research facilities of the university. Located in a forested area, around 2 hours from the faculty by car, it is a tranquil place where researchers conduct experiments, observe local flora and fauna populations, and discuss their ideas. It is also possible for students to book rooms for some days, to find some peace and quiet to work on their thesis. For our course, it was a 1-week trip. Any interested student could join, and we ended up filling 2 small vans, summing 18 people. The schedule included taking samples of soil, moss, and water, and compiling the data in a relative map. The very first day we finished our work exhausted, and I could see that my students needed some well-earned relaxation. The sauna was booked for us, in 2 sessions, one for the boys and one for the girls. The girls needed some time to prepare themselves, so it was decided that the men would go first. While the students were getting ready, I drove with one colleague who helps me run the course to the local store and bought some beers for all the guys, and we could all drink together. At 7 p.m., we met with the male students who wanted to come along. We started the walk from the dorms to where the sauna room was located, around 15 minutes walk from there. It was already dark, as the night falls so early in such high latitudes. The cold was breaching under our clothes, and we longed for the sweet warmth of the sauna. At the same time, we tried to explain the international students who went there for the first time how important sauna was to Finnish culture, and how refreshed they would feel after. The way to the sauna cuts through the forest. There was a semi-clear path, but no lights to trail it, so we used some mobile phone flashlights. At times, the path would be lost due to the leaves that covered it, as they had fallen from the trees by late autumn in a colorful rain. In this case, we all had to try and locate the continuation of the path, stressing our eyes, aided by the weak light of the mobile phones. It would be wrong to say that it was completely dark, however. There were some lights, light blue bulbs of light being set all around us, seemingly random. The diameter was around 30 centimeters across. There was no clear geometry in the way that they were placed, and as their poles were as dark as the night, it looked like they were floating in the air. It was strange to me that, while they looked luminous, their light didn't really stretch far from their spot. It just served as a small spotlight, in a very small radius around the object, not illuminating anything around them. I had seen them, of course, while bringing previous year's students here, but I didn't really observe them until now. That's because a student brought it up as a question while we were walking. "So, what are these bulbs supposed to be?" he asked. "They clearly are not here to guide our way." I took a moment to think before answering. "They are probably for the biology students who want to observe the behavior of the moths," I said. Frankly, I hadn't seen anyone observing the moths here, but it was the only educated guess I could make. "So, they are supposed to lead to anywhere? A bunker or something maybe?" asked another student, one of the internationals. My colleague interrupted the discussion. "I'm not young anymore, but he is definitely older than me. Tonight, he seemed a bit stricter than I had come to know him over the years. It was very unusual." "No, they don't," he said firmly. "And by no means should you try to make a path out of them or try to follow them. It is very dangerous, and for years, it has been mentioned from the faculty that it is forbidden to do so." I looked at his figure, dimly lit from the light of his mobile. His face was like a mask deprived of feelings. He wasn't like that normally. He was always friendly and talkative. For some reason, the statement he made was important, even though it sounded like a rule that a parent would set for curious, immature children. However, I had an extremely odd feeling. I don't remember if I had ever heard what he said behind the walls of the university. I believe I had a rumor in my mind regarding exactly this subject, but I can't recall ever hearing it from somebody. Somehow, I knew by heart what he had just mentioned, and yet, I don't think I had heard it again before. I just couldn't remember. This thought got wrapped around my mind. We continued on the way to our destination, but I couldn't shake this strange feeling off me. As we kept on walking, I let my eyes wander upon the strange lights, and my heart skipped a beat. Had one of them just moved? It was the slightest motion, and I caught it with the corner of my eye. A minimal wobbling of the bulb. No, it couldn't be. I'm getting old, and my eyesight is not as sharp as it used to be back in the day. Still, I felt creeped out until we reached the place. My heart rested when we finally got to our destination. The traditional Finnish sauna is always built next to the lake near the forest, and it is 100% made of wood. So was this one, exactly as it was supposed to be. Just watching the familiar sight made me feel relaxed. It is good to spend some quality time with students off the record, away from the formalities of the academia. You get to see what are their true thoughts and aspirations, something that can get buried under the weights of the students' homework and the teacher's research. We genuinely had a great time together. We did talk, of course, about the ups and downs of the faculty, but we also discussed more things outside the usual, while the steam scorched us. Then the brave ones dived at the lake. It was fun to see the international students getting their Honorary Finn award, albeit with some screaming and cursing in their native languages. When the icy water embraced them completely, then the best moment right after the sauna came. That perfectly relaxed state, drinking beer while silently admiring the beauty of the winter wonderland that is the Nordic forest. We did talk some more about everything and nothing, and after a few loops of that whole routine, our time was up. We met the girls that were coming to the sauna while we were walking home and cheerfully waved to them. A few minutes later, we were at the bunkers. Upon arriving there, we all agreed that we had a great time. However, as we were queuing for lunch, I heard the question that filled me with a silent, yet persistent dread. "Did anybody see Timo?" asked one of the students. At first, nobody was nervous. There are many places he would be. Perhaps he decided to stay in his room, or he was using the restroom. But the longer we discussed it, the more curious the case became. "He's not in our room," said his roommate. I checked. "He was at the sauna, right?" noted someone else. For some reason, I couldn't remember. Had he come with us? I think we said something, and he was present in the sauna. Or did we just say something about him? Why couldn't I remember? It turns out that nobody was certain about what happened. Some said he was definitely with us at the sauna, and some argued that they weren't so sure if he had come. Suspicious as that sounded, we were all agreeing at one point. Nobody heard him or saw him during the walk home. I looked at my colleague. From his eyes, I could tell he was feeling exactly like me. No matter how experienced you are, losing a student is the most stressful situation a teacher can have. Fear started to spread inside me, but I knew that letting that show would be catastrophic. Moreover, I still believe that this was nothing. Timo would appear sooner or later. He was just probably around there somewhere. He wasn't found that night. I did my best to search for him after the girls came back, and reported that they hadn't seen him either. The students also helped me as well as they could, but I sent them to bed sometime later, as I was still caring for their schedule for the following day. We tried calling him many times as well, but he did not answer. I called the police the next morning, after having a white night searching for the young man. When the officers arrived, of course they questioned me, and the other instructor, as well as the early woken up students. They were suspicious of us at first, but everyone assured them we had been with the students all along, and we took good care of everything. I was very thankful for that intervention. The police told us they would start a search for Timo. I gathered all my students and asked them if they wanted to go home, because of what happened, or stay and finish the field trip, while also trying to search around the forest for their friend. They all agreed they wanted to stay, as they felt the need to help, although I do also suspect that they didn't want to have to retake the field trip again next year, and delay their graduations. We ended up following our normal schedule mostly. We were extra vigilant for traces that could help the police, and kept calling Timo on his phone, but it was not fruitful. The forest started feeling less welcoming day after day, as Timo wasn't showing up. His parents had been warned, but they lived far away, and the police suggested that they shouldn't come at the place yet. In all my years of teaching experience, I dreaded having to confront them in person. At this point, as awful as it sounds, I have to admit that, with time, people get more relaxed. We kept on with our routine, and there were times that we forgot about the whole situation. I feel so guilty about this, but I do believe that the mind is designed to keep worrying for the same thing all day, as that would make it collapse. Of course, every time when the day was over, and I laid at my bed exhausted from the hard work, I had terrible thoughts rushing inside me once again, each day worse than the last. With all this, we reached the final day of the trip. Timo was nowhere to be found. Everybody was feeling under the weather, and rightfully so. We only worked for half the day. As the evening came, I remembered we also booked the sauna for that day as well. I was very skeptical about going to the same place after the calamity started, but my students actually really wanted to go, as they suggested that it would help them relax a little bit, after all this stress and physical exhaustion as well. So, we went. This time everyone was counted for, and we were extremely careful, all of us, in the dark night that crawled in even faster than before. We silently walked through the strange lights in the forest. No one was joking this time, and I had the feeling that the lights were slowly moving closer. The sauna once again proved to be a remedy for our troubles. We even managed to make some jokes again, something that was completely lost since the day Timo was lost. I think the small moral booster was more important than anything else. On the way back, I felt something that has been haunting me for many years. My knee was suddenly in terrible pain. I had that old basketball injury that really hurt when it was deciding to kick in. I must have groaned, because I saw many curious eyes looking at me. "It's nothing, lads," I said, trying to sound in less pain than I actually was. "I'll be with you in a second. It's just an old gift from my sporting career." That must have been the most immature and idiotic option in my entire life, but I didn't want people to see me like that, and everybody was feeling so good at the time that I would never want to make them feel worried again the same night. I watched them all move ahead as I was trying to focus my breathing and bring my leg to a more painless position. I looked at the joint as it was pulsing lightly. It didn't take that long. I already felt better. A few moments and it was over. I looked up and saw a light moving ahead. Their flashlight. I walked carefully, as I didn't want to run and force another pain-striking experience. It was very dark, so I used my phone to see. But still the light was not enough. I was set on following the flashlight ahead of me. Very, very slowly I started closing the distance between us. It was at this time I started realizing that something was off. The light in front of me moved in peculiar ways, turning and twisting many times more than what it should be normal, while following a simple path. I looked down on my feet. What path? I was walking on old fallen leaves and roots, but there was no clear way around me. I tried moving my light around, but the path was nowhere to be seen. I started yelling at the guys in front of me to stop, but I got no answer. At this moment, I stopped caring for my knee. For the first time since that cursed field trip had started, I succumbed to my own dread. I panicked. I started running towards the light, yelling for it to stop at times. To my horror, the more I approached it, the more I realized what a grave mistake I had made. The light slowly changed color and turned to blue as I was getting closer. I knew it was one of the lights no one was supposed to approach, but now it was my only hope. Was its desire to help me find my way back? I hoped this was the case, but deep inside me, I guess I already knew that it had tricked me to carry me away. I finally reached it. I had the slightest hope that I was completely wrong, that I was still following my students. I decided to go the long way around, but all my dreams crumbled to dust when I saw the light becoming idle a few meters before I got to it. The thing remained there, completely immobile, like it always had been there since the dawn of time. It felt like it was mocking me. I tried to touch it to see what the hell it was, but right before making contact, I felt my fingers freeze like they were in ice. The thing was so cold yet emitting light. The effect was very local, as I didn't feel colder than normal on my face or body. It was the most otherworldly experience of my life. I was now completely lost. It was dark and cloudy, so there was no hope of navigating. I opened Google Maps on my phone, but although I had signal, the map gave only nonsense. My only chance was to keep on walking until I found civilization. And thus, I walked for many hours. The lights were all around me, and it seemed like they were always moving out of my way, letting me through. After a long time there was some more natural light coming, and I thought dawn would break soon, but it never did. It looked like this was a place where the sun never shined. It was only the dark of the night, or this before dawn twilight zone thing. I desperately tried to call someone, but no call was going through. I felt like I had stumbled in a different plane of existence, where the only reality was the dreadful silence and the eerie ghost lights, slowly dancing to the music of nothing. At this point, I found the one who I never thought I would see. It was unmistakably him, walking in his hoodie and oversized hat. Timo? I yelled, rushing towards him. "What happened to you? Where have you been?" He looked at me, but he gave no response. His eyes were sunken in their sockets, all life drawn out of them. I hugged him, crying. "What is wrong, my friend? Where are we?" Again, I got nothing. The moment I let him go off my arms, he started walking again. I reached him again and tried talking to him. He just kept on. I grabbed him by the hoodie and tried to make him follow me, but he didn't even show a sign of stress. As I was dragging him behind me, every time I would let go for a second, he would start walking to an unknown direction. I tried to see if he had a specific goal, but after rotating him, I realized that he would just keep going forward at whatever direction he was turned to. He was a living ghost. I took him with me and dragged him around, seeking a salvation that wasn't there. Hours passed, but nothing would change. At some point, I felt so tired that I fell down. Timo kept on walking, and before I could do anything, he was lost in the thick fog. I yelled at the top of my lungs and tried to find him, but he had disappeared. I had lost him for the second time, and once more, I walked. Hours passed, then a whole day. I didn't feel thirsty or hungry. I was just tired. For some reason, the only feelings I had were exhaustion and fear, both ever growing. I felt like I was born in this place, out of pure despair and darkness, and it felt almost normal now. When I thought I couldn't go on, I saw a place that looked even darker than my surroundings. Without knowing why, I approached it. Anything else would be better than this endless monotony. What I saw then made my last hope fade away. Into the creeping horror around me, the blackness in front of me was a creature that expanded for tenths of meters, both in height and width. It was like a living shadow and black tentacle, like expansions of itself, were floating all over the place. It seemed like it had no physical substance, yet it was living and breathing. The night was dark, but it was much darker. The shadows coming out of it embraced the environment, and the small lights were gathering more densely around it. The light was glooming and dimming in a slow pattern, unlike what I had seen before. I don't know how I knew that, but it felt ancient, much older than any human, and possibly even the forest surrounding it. I collapsed to the cold ground, and for the first time, I noticed a black thing wrapped around my ankle. It looked like a cord, but I couldn't feel it on my skin. Horrified, I followed the shadow with my eyes and saw that its root was the thing before me. I tried to take it off when my fingers never touched any material other than my skin. The bond was not made from matter, but it did grab me tight. I was sensing it in my soul. At this point, I realized it had a complete hold of me. I felt attuned to it. There was no voice in my head, no organized thought, just horrifying images and a deep fear, so primal and overwhelming that no other human should ever experience. I felt my mind falling into insanity, like it was being dragged by a ghostly arm to the depths of an unending madness. I knew now. The creature was a matrix. It was here before the dawn of man, and will be long after the last one perishes. The blue ghostlights were its young, luring living creatures to the nest. Both they and their mother can't eat flesh and bone. They were feeding on the pure energy extracted by their prey, and now the prey was me. I looked at my black bondage again. I felt my energy being strained away from me. I had to escape, but I was so tired. Somehow, words formed in my head, but I wasn't sure they were mine. Her name is Zeth Shagul. She and her young will grow forevermore, and one day breach into our own reality, consuming everything and spreading chaos all across the earth. God save us when she decides to do so. I got up and started to walk away. I couldn't run. I didn't have the strength to do so. The thing didn't hunt me. It didn't have to. I already knew I was doomed. Still, I have to try. My phone was still alive, as I always carry 2 power banks with me in case of emergency. Kudos to me for being so organized, I guess. As I was walking away towards a direction I don't really have, black shadow still wrapped around my leg. I'm writing this. I am not even sure it will get through, but it's my last chance to warn the world. Be aware of the mother with the silent children. Don't follow the ghostlights, for for they will lead you to your doom. I have to escape. I'm sure I can get back to where I came from. I need to believe, but I am just so tired. I have to go on though. I will just walk a bit more and I will be home. I will walk just a bit more. Just a bit more. God, I'm so tired. For the last 2 decades, I've been paralyzed, unable to move anything apart from my eyes. It took 20 years for my family to afford the technology we are using now to help me to say this. I am facing a screen with a camera. Underneath is a QWERTY keyboard, but the letters are spaced far enough apart so that the camera can type the letter I am looking at. By seeing what my eyes are pointed at, I should be happier, but it's too fucking late. That man, that evil man, for 15 years he visited me, sat by the bed he put me in. Jim was our neighbor, and seemed like a decent enough man. He lived alone in the house next door to mine. My wife, Chrissy, reached out to him one Christmas, knowing he would be spending it alone, and invited him to dinner. He came and was pleasant, slightly awkward but inoffensive. He excused himself to use the toilet. I told him which door to take. He excused himself and returned to the table. It was such a small thing to notice, especially for me, but his belt was no longer the brown one he was wearing, but a black one. I thought it was strange, but who would ever say anything about such a small detail? I thought I might have just made a mistake. Jim coming over became more frequent, at least once a week, sometimes bringing biscuits for the kids, or coming over for Sunday lunch. One night, I was stuck in traffic. My Nokia died on my way home from work, so I couldn't call Chrissy to tell her I was running late. That night, her father had a heart attack. She couldn't wait for me to come home and couldn't get a hold of me, so she asked Jim to watch the kids while she went to the hospital. Eventually, I get home. I put my key into the lock and already felt the air in the house was weighted, thick with dread. I silently walk into my own home, feeling like an intruder and hear whispering. I crept up the stairs. The whispering was coming from baby Daniel's room. Dad, Dad, over and over again. I push the door open and find Jim, standing with Jamie in his arms, wearing nothing but my dressing gown. I asked him what he was doing. He made up some story about the baby spitting up on his clothes and him needing to get changed, but I cut him off, grabbed my son, and told him to leave my house. Once I finally got in touch with Chrissy, she said I overreacted. Baby Daniel was fine, but I told her that I did not feel comfortable with that man. She didn't listen. She always saw the best in people. Months go by and Jim hasn't come by our house. Myself and Chrissy have decided to convert the loft into a bedroom. The twins are growing up and need their own space, and a 2-bedroom isn't appropriate for a now 5-person family. The plan was for me and Chrissy to split the loft into 2 rooms, one for us and one for baby Daniel, and the twins can have the existing rooms on the 2nd floor. Our house is a terraced house, so we share a wall on each side with our next door neighbors. When we get into our loft to start construction, we see a hole between our loft space and Jim's, big enough for me to get through, but that isn't tall. On the floor was magazines, current magazines from 1998. We haven't been in the loft since we moved in 5 years before. I knew there was something wrong. I waited until I saw Jim leave his house. I went to the loft and climbed through the hole to the other side. I've never seen anything like it. The walls were covered in photographs of my house, of my family, of me. There was the toothbrush I thought I left on a work trip, a pair of boxers I assumed got lost in the wash, one of my white shirts hanging, worn and creased from the lonely light bulb dangling from the ceiling. I heard a door slam and footsteps climbing a staircase, but I wasn't going to move. I wasn't going to hide from this creep. I was going to confront him about all of this weird shit. I heard the ladder to his loft creak as he climbed it until there he was, directly in front of me. He didn't even have the courtesy to look intimidated. That's when I made the stupidest mistake of my life. I lunged at him, arms outstretched, ready to wring the fucker's neck. When I fell through the plaster, I snapped my neck, tore the nerve in my spine, and hit my head on the falling debris. I landed on his bedroom floor. It looked just like mine. I woke up 6 months later, stuck in this bed. The first words I heard was my baby son calling that man Dad. The first thing I saw was my wife, resting her head on this man's shoulder. He visited me for 15 years, smiling from the foot of my bed, silently bragging about the life he stole from me. For 20 years, I watched my son grow up, not knowing me, and calling another man his father. Jim died 5 years ago. Chrissy has worn black every day since. I will never get the last 20 years of my life back, but my family need to know the truth. My life has been a waste, but their lives have been a lie. I'm sorry, Chrissy. I thought you should know the truth. I love you. This happened a little over 10 years ago when I was in elementary school. I'm 21 years old now, but this still gives me the chills anytime I think about it. When I was younger, before my parents went into the military and we moved around a lot, we lived in a nice suburban area about 30 minutes outside of Austin, Texas. It was a really good neighborhood, and it was extremely rare for anything strange or unsettling to happen. In fact, it was so rare it was unheard of, so this makes it all the more creepier. As it was springtime in Texas, my parents had decided to open up our windows to let in the cool air into the house. There was a breeze that had gone on through the day and into the early evening, and in an effort to save some money by keeping the AC off, my stepmom, Jen, and my dad decided to keep the windows open until they decided to go to bed, where they would then shut all the windows and turn the AC back on. I didn't have a problem with this because my room would be stuffy without the cool breeze or AC, so I left my window wide open and kept the blinds up to help keep in cool air from the outside. Now, since I was in elementary school, I had a very early bedtime, so when 8 rolled around, my 2 younger sisters and I took our snacks back to the kitchen and began to get ready for bed. I went into the bathroom first to do my business and brush my teeth, and after that, I walked into my bedroom and began searching through my dresser for a pair of pajamas. I found what I was looking for and started to undress, but then I remembered my window was still open, and stopped what I was doing. We lived in a 1-story house at the time, and my room was located at the front of the house, giving me a view of the street and the house across from the road. I didn't want anyone passing by to catch a glimpse of me changing on accident, so I walked over to my window to shut the blinds. I had just grabbed the strings to bring the blinds down when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. When I turned my head to get a better glimpse, that was when I saw the face press against the screen of my window. He had to have been at least in his 40s, and though the details are a bit fuzzy, I distinctly remember his dark eyes and crooked, yellow teeth as he smiled, leering at me. He had his hands cupped around his face to see into my room better, and when he caught me staring, his eyes turned my way, keeping me where I stood as if I were paralyzed. I may have been too scared to move at first, but when he started to mess with my window screen and attempt to pull it out, I did the only logical thing a 10-year-old girl could do. I ran out of my bedroom, screaming and crying that there was a man outside my window trying to get in. Jen and my dad met me in the hallway, and while Jen tried to console me and checked on my 2 sisters, my dad went to search for the strange man. First by checking our front yard, then the backyard, and then up and down the nearby streets. He never found him, but he did find muddy footprints standing directly in front of my window, along with crushed flowers that we had recently planted the weekend before. My dad assured us that no one was there, but just to be safe, he shut all the open windows and locked them, drew the blinds, and made sure all the doors were locked. I went to bed that night unable to sleep, scared that if I opened my eyes and pulled the covers from above my head, I would see that same man staring at me, only this time, he'd be in my room. We did tell the police the next morning what happened, but nothing came of it, and the man was never caught. To this day, I don't know what his intentions were. Maybe he was just a creep trying to watch a girl undress, or maybe he had something worse in mind, considering he was trying to get inside my room. Either way, I never saw that man again, and a year or so later, we moved out of the state for the military, so I didn't worry as much about the strange man outside my window. Unfortunately, that incident made me extremely paranoid of open windows and blinds at night, and now I make sure that my blinds are drawn and the windows are locked before it gets dark, in fear that another stranger may try to get inside my bedroom. A word of advice? I suggest you do the same. On September of this year, I figured out a lot of things. It all started when I missed out on a family reunion this year due to an illness I caught. It was a huge letdown since we usually hit places like Busch Gardens, or we just ate somewhere fancy. Since I missed out that year, I decided on treating myself to a mini vacation. Before we get to that, I should share a little background. In my youth, during the winter, I occasionally visited a place I call Mushroom Lake with my dad. He always gave a tour each time we visited, and I remember always admiring the scenery. It had lots of trees, a huge lake in the middle, and it was peaceful. The first part of Mushroom Lake was a tiny field with trees surrounding it. There were 2 pathways which took 10 minutes to walk through. Both paths led to a giant lake by itself, surrounded in a circle of trees. If you went around this lake, you would find even more paths to take. I never explored this place in its entirety, and I don't know if I will. The only drawback was that it was chilly, so we never stayed long. Only a couple of hours each visit. I always remembered pressuring Pops to take me on a better season. He was always busy outside Christmas vacation though, and didn't really make an effort to take me outside of it. As an adult, I planned to camp at Mushroom Lake for the day. I want to clarify, I don't want to give the real name of Mushroom Lake, or its location, because I don't want to be responsible for anything that could happen there. I only found out this last year, that the place was very strange. It was a couple-hour drive to the spot with places like fast food being an hour away. Fortunately, I wasn't a McDonald's addict, like everyone in my family tree was, and brought my own food for the trip. It wasn't much, but if it was only a day, it didn't matter. I arrived at the spot and drove up the path that still looked the same as I saw it in my youth. The idea was to get my tent set up at the tiny field area. I also brought my own fire pit, gifted by a friend, along with me as well. In addition, I also had a hunting rifle prepared in case a hillbilly jackass was hiding out, ready to violate me. They would of course get pumped with bullets if they tried anything funny. As I drove up to the entrance, I discovered plenty of mushrooms off the beaten pathway. They were scattered and hiding among the trees. Mushroom Lake didn't look as gorgeous as I remembered it being. I guess without snow, it's just another forest/park that people occasionally visit. However, it was still cool to relive a part of my childhood. I easily set up my tent and found a perfect location for the fire pit. Afterwards, I admired my work and took several pictures of the surrounding area and the campsite I set up. I didn't know what I would do solo, but eventually decided on going fishing. The lake itself would make a good spot, and I also hoped to find other friendly faces who also had the idea of staying here. I took one of the pathways, and as I walked it, I found even more of those mushrooms. The place seemed to have a problem with these, as they were scattered around. I was distracted with snapping photos of the area, on my cell phone, that it took a little over 10 minutes to arrive at the lake, but upon getting there, I found something unexpected. At Mushroom Lake itself, there were wild horses. I've never seen ponies outside of the occasional zoo trip. It had a walk-in barn with my niece, so it was surprising. I didn't know how to feel, but when one of them saw me arriving, they stopped and stared right at me. None of them were alarmed by my presence or made any effort to flee. I didn't move from my spot. I didn't even try to take pictures, as I worried it would provoke an attack of some kind. I simply stood still and looked at the horses that consisted of being white, gray, brown, black, and of albino color. There were at least a dozen of them, and I was nervous when another emerged from some tall grass with a soaking wet mane. This equine started slowly walking towards me. That was all that was needed to get me to go back the way I came from. I don't know if they would have tolerated my company, but I wasn't going to find out. I looked back to see if I was being followed. Luckily, that didn't seem to be the case. But that still didn't stop the paranoia that I felt. Luckily, I didn't bring my niece, as she would probably squeal at the amount of horses. After arriving back and calming myself down, I started cooking. It was starting to become dusk and I was getting pretty hungry by now, as I started a campfire in the pit. I felt a lot better as I watched the steak I brought being cooked. However, while waiting for my meal to turn rare, I spotted something among the trees and mushrooms. It was the silhouette of a child that I couldn't make out. They looked to be around the age of a first grader, no older than 6. I also noticed they looked unusual from what I could see of them, but the shadows and distance made it hard to tell. What was a kid doing here by themselves? I was hoping he was at least in the company of other people staying. Was he lost? Was he trying to find his way back? Was someone trying to find them? I waved, but no response. He just stood there. How was I going to handle this? Eventually, they took off running in the opposite direction, and I started giving chase. "Wait, why are you out here by yourself? It's dangerous in the wilderness," I shouted, feeling concerned and responsible. When I made my way to the spot they once stood at, I found a disturbing sight. On the ground, where the child was, there was blood. Tiny spots on the ground. It created a trail which led to where the kid was heading. I followed it and noticed that the amount of bleeding seemed excessive for such a young age. It was only spots. No puddles though, as if he had been cut and didn't bother covering up his wound. I never saw him. The blood only continued as I went deeper into the forest, and that was where I finally hit a dead end. There were other trails of blood, in all kinds of different directions. The mushrooms started getting more frequent the further I traveled. I tried calling out for the kid, saying I didn't mean any harm. I didn't know what to do. If I left, that child would either find his parents eventually, or something terrible could happen to them. That was when my nose hit something, and it was sudden. It was a horrible stench. Something had died here, and it was of rot and decay. I quickly turned around, going back the way I came. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I wasn't staying the night. I was going to find a place which had signal and quickly call the police as soon as possible. A missing child that's obviously disturbed. I did everything I could and needed to leave it to the authorities themselves. Weird horses. A kid that leaves blood behind and vanishes without a trace. An overgrowth of those mushrooms. It was turning dark and, unfortunately, my steak had been burnt. Oh well. I'll eat McDonald's and cut my losses. Luckily, the fire had extinguished, so it didn't take long to get the fire pit into the back of the truck. As I was doing this, my ears caught the sound of something rustling nearby. I didn't know the direction, but something wasn't right. At first, I figured it was in my head, just paranoia, but then I heard the sound continuing. I stopped, turned around, faced the campsite, and stood for what seemed like a while. I never budged, only staying at the spot I was at. After what seemed like forever, my fear had paid off as the tent started shaking. Someone or something was in there. Screw it, I was abandoning everything else. I got into my vehicle, started it, and the front of the tent opened up, revealing several children. They all had hats that pointed downward, and they were holding weapons that I couldn't see very well. The hats they wore also seemed to be leaking something. I wasn't staying to observe any longer than that. I started the car and drove the hell out of there, being chased, but escaping easily thanks to having some wheels. If I had stayed any longer, those children would have been my killers. I made it home safely, and never told anyone about the incident. I wonder if my dad knew about the dangers of this place, and never told me just to keep my innocence. Maybe he thought I would eventually forget about it. If you find an area like the one I described, I recommend leaving right away, unless you're prepared and bring an army with you. Otherwise, stay the hell away from the Mushroom Lake, unless it's winter. This happened a few years ago, but it stays in the front of my mind all the time. It's taken years of therapy to help me move forward, and, truthfully, it'll probably never fully go away. It's not for a lack of trying, I can tell you that much. I was driving home from college for winter break, and I absolutely needed to get away from school for a bit. My last semester had been a beast, and I needed a lot of rest, recuperation, and home-cooked meals. I was looking forward to being home and hibernating over the holidays. Normally, I would fly home, but I decided to take to the roads for this trip. I thought the quiet solitude would do me well, and I didn't have money for a plane ticket. Besides, I didn't want to deal with a holiday crush, and it was just a 2 days drive. I had never done it, and I liked the idea of a little adventure. Well, I quickly learned that long car rides aren't exactly fun. I had my phone pick the fastest route, and that often took me down old highways that aren't really used anymore. It sucked, especially if the weather turns, and it did, at times. The rain came down so hard, my poor little windshield wipers couldn't keep pace. Twice on that first day, I pulled off to the side of the road and waited the storm out. I played on my phone until the great deluge was over. The first odd occurrence happened later in the day. It didn't really register as something larger until much later. I'd pulled out of a gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. The pumps were so old I was curious if they would even accept a credit card payment. They didn't. I hoofed into the store and noticed the lights in the place were really low. It seemed like every other bulb was burned out. If your date's house was lit this way, it would be pretty clear what was on their mind for the evening. Mood lighting at a gas station though. Hard pass. Hello? I asked, half hoping no one would answer, and I could just skedaddle out of here and down to the next Sunoco. What'll it be? Came a voice from the back. They didn't immediately come forward and just kind of hung back in the storeroom of the station. I need to pay for gas, but your pump doesn't have a credit card machine? No, it doesn't, the man said, finally walking into the light. He looked like he'd seen some shit. He had miles on the odometer, that's for sure. He was wearing a faded Reagan/Bush t-shirt that had so many stains on it that it looked like a Rorschach test. You can use it here though. Great, I said, clutching my keys in one hand, and I pulled my card out of my pocket with the other. I just need $10. Okay, he said as he pulled out a manual credit card reader, the kind with carbon paper, and took my card. I like this design, he said as he made an impression of the card with a cha-chunk noise. Just a standard Visa, I said, taking back my card, but that thing seems ancient. If it ain't broke, he said, turning back and heading back into the darkness. I stood there for a bit, a little stunned by the abruptness of it all, but decided that I didn't really want moss to grow under my feet in a place like this, so I went out, pumped my gas, and split. When I was leaving, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the clerk come out of the station and watch me drive away. He whistled, and a few men that apparently had been hanging out, I genuinely had not seen them before, pointed at my car. An old 1950s looking truck pulled up to the pump, and I could tell they were all buddies. The clerk pointed at me again. I hit the gas pedal and got out of there as fast as a Corolla could go. Like I said, the vibe was off, but being a woman is basically doing risk assessment during any interaction over the course of a day, so I quickly forgot about it and motored away. I drove for another 5 hours, heard dozens of country preachers on the radio, and saw very few other cars. The rain did not let up once. Finally, I was too tired to go on and I decided to call it for the day. I had been driving for what seemed like 1,000 hours, and all I wanted to do was take a warm shower and sleep forever, preferably at a nicer hotel. I wasn't looking for the Ritz, but I was looking for something a bit more upscale than a rickety looking motel. Unfortunately, the only things at this exit was a Greasy Spoon and the Check-In motel. The Check-In wasn't what I would call glamorous. It had seen some action and wore its scars well. From the road, the sign barely registered in the evening sky because of the burnt out bulbs. The place wasn't a flop house per se, but you wouldn't take offense if someone described it that way. Regardless, I need a bed to sleep on, and it had one. The front clerk was an older man. I pegged him in his late 40s, a little overweight with glasses and an exhausted looking face. He was doing a crossword when I walked in and didn't look up. Before I could say anything, he asked, "What is a 7-letter word for a storm? Starts with T." I thought as my brain kicked into gear. A tempest? He checked the letters and smiled. Thanks, that was driving me nuts. I love word puzzles, I said, instantly regretting the use of the phrase. Word puzzles. Instead of, crosswords. Me too. Gotta do something to keep my mind sharp. God knows this job ain't keeping me engaged. Slow night? Slow year. Well, I said, I need a room for the night. That's a good change of pace, right? You're not alone. Yes, I am. No, you're not. My blood cooled. Was there someone behind me? Did someone sneak into my back seat and waiting to pounce? Before my mind could conjure up another horror, the front clerk filled in the rest of the story. We had 2 other people check in earlier. Oh, I said, internally calming myself down. Guess I'm not that special. None of us are, he said, taking my credit card. No offense. None taken, but truthfully, I took some. While he ran my card, I took in the office. At a closer inspection, it looked like the place hadn't been upgraded since the 1980s. Besides being out of date, it was pretty haggard. The decor probably had cocaine and aquinate residue all over it. I made a note to not sit anywhere in here. You're in room 6, the front clerk said as he handed me the keys. Checkout is noon. Breakfast is at 7. What's for breakfast? Donuts and fruit. American standards. Sure, he said, returning to his crossword puzzle. I turned to leave and he piped up. Hey, what's a 6-letter word for incredible fear? Starts with T. Terror? I called out as I left the office. I parked in front of my tiny room and walked inside. The 80s sheen continued into this room. The furniture was in better shape, but still what Goodwill would call slightly used. I was just happy there weren't any visible stains, and that the room had HBO. I took a shower. The water pressure oscillated between a fire hose and the slow trickle of the LA River, but at least the water stayed hot. I got out and planned on blow drying my rat's nest when I realized there wasn't a hairdryer in the room. There was a slot for a hairdryer in the bathroom, but the gun itself was long gone. I weighed my options, but I did not want sleep creases in my hair. Even if the people who'd seen it tomorrow are various clerks at gas stations, fast food employees, and me in my rearview mirror. I got dressed and left my room for the front office. When I opened the door, I was assaulted by the brightness of the sign for the motel. It was all lit up now, and the colors on the sign were so vibrant. They looked new, but they had probably just changed the burnt out bulbs. When I walked into the office, there was a new, younger guy working the counter. He was an upgrade to the previous clerk. He greeted me with a warm smile and a nod. "The sign out front looks great," I said, searching for the start of this conversation and failing. "Thanks," he replied. "They put it in last week. Must have just added in new bulbs," I added, furthering my horrible start to the conversation. The new clerk smiled. "Can I do anything for you?" "Yeah, actually, you can. The hairdryer in my room is missing." "Missing? As in, not there?" "I don't really want sleep creases in my hair," I said, instantly regretting giving up that information. It was then that I realized I'd be a horrible spy. "That is so strange. Those are brand new too." "I came at the right time, it seems. Everything has been updated recently." "Well, we just opened about 5 months ago." My jaw dropped. I was about to respond when I finally took in the office. It had changed. It wasn't the same as it was before. Granted, the furniture was the same, but it looked new. Everything looked brand new, like the place had looked when it first opened. This wasn't the same place I checked in at earlier. I suddenly felt a chill go down my body. That wasn't because of my wet hair. I looked at the clerk and forced a smile. "Hey, where was the other guy that checked me in? Heavy set, likes crosswords?" He looked confused. "When did you check in?" "About 40 minutes ago." "Oh," he said. "That must have been the last shift. I just came on myself." When I would normally make a joke at his word choice, I was terrified. What the hell was going on? Was I dosed with something? Was the water in the shower laced? "Can I come take a look at the room?" the clerk said. "I want to see how they removed it." My brain kicked into survival mode. "They just cut the wire. I was wondering if you had a spare is all." "Jeez," he said. "I don't think we do. Sorry. Is there anything else I could get you?" My sanity was all I could think to say, but never blurted it out. I could almost taste the letters in my teeth. "No, I'll be okay. If there's anything else I can do to make this a more enjoyable stay, don't hesitate to ask me." I smiled and then walked outside. There was a palpable charge in the air. I didn't know what to think, and I had about a million questions. My brain was telling me that the sign was more busted up, but my eyes were showing me something different. Gut reactions can be scarily accurate. I stopped and checked out the 2 cars in the parking lot beside my own. One was an old pickup from the 70s. Hard to tell as I don't know jack about truck models, but it had a look like it should have mutton chops. The other car looked older too, but it was in good condition. That's when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw an old 1950s truck pull into the driveway. I didn't need to look at the driver to know who it was. I just straight up ran to my room and slammed the door behind me. I remember watching the sailboat art jiggle from the impact. I locked the door, grabbed the nastiest looking hanger I could find, and held it close. I ran over to the phone in the room and dialed the front desk. After about 10 rings, which, seriously, the other side picked up. Only this wasn't the sound of the younger clerk. It was the older guy. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I started out, still flustered from the voice. "Can you do me a favor and tell me if there's a truck in the parking lot?" "Is this a joke?" "No, I promise it's not. A truck that just arrived." "Is this a drug thing? I don't need any drug deals in my room. It never ends well and the janitor has the day off." "No, it's not a drug thing. Just, is there a truck? Yes or no?" He sighed. "I didn't see one pull up. I'll take a look out the front window. Hold on a second." He put the phone down and I could hear himself heft off the chair. I looked around my room and, unlike the front office, it was still the run-down looking room I checked into. I felt I had brain bubbles or something. I heard him sit down and pick back up the receiver.
No trucks.
Jesus Christ, I swear I saw one.
Maybe it was an El Camino?
No, I said firmly. It was definitely not an El Camino.
Is this the girl in room 6?
Yeah,
What's a 9-letter word for watch that starts with a T?
I sighed. Timepiece. I heard him counting and then,
Thanks, that's a lifesaver. This puzzle is starting to clear up.
hey, I asked, is there a younger guy who works at the front desk?
I'm only 38.
He responded, yeah, you're young too. I said, needlessly consoling this strange man, but a guy closer to my age. I went up there a few minutes ago and he was there.
I haven't moved in the last half hour, and I'm the only employee that works this shift.
I felt a bomb go off in my brain. What the hell had just happened to me? This is going to sound odd. I started before he cut me off.
Why break a streak?
He interjected. I ignored him. But did you replace light bulbs in the front sign today?
I don't even know where the ladder is around here.
He answered.
Did you need anything else?
I said no and hung up the phone. I suddenly felt drunk. I know I saw a repaired sign. I know I spoke with a young clerk. I know the front office looked brand new no more than 5 minutes ago. What the hell was happening? I shook my head as if that would suddenly put all the cogs and gears in place and stood up from the bed. I had to check to see if that truck was still outside. I walked over to the curtains and pulled them back and saw nothing. No old trucks anyway, or old cars, or anything. It was just my car and approaching storm clouds. I closed the curtains and sat down on the ground. Was I going crazy? Was this how it starts? Imagined conversations, hallucinated figures, missing time? Just then, there was a brilliant flash and a massive crack of thunder that jolted me back to the moment. Then the rain started really pouring. It was like someone had flipped a switch. It was one of those violent rainstorms that doesn't just fall but hurls itself into the ground. After a minute, there was another brilliant flash of light and another crash of thunder, and then total darkness. The power had gone out. Fucking great, I muttered as I banged my head against the wall. That's when I heard murmurs outside my door. It was hard to make out what they were saying because of the rain, but I heard multiple voices. They were coming towards my room. I peeked out the crack in the window and saw the clerk from the gas station and his buddies in the 50s pickup. My heart sank. I pulled back from the window and prayed they didn't see me. I crawled to the door and slowly stood up and locked it. As the deadbolt slid into place, I heard the clerk stop in front of my door. "You in there, stranger?" I froze. My mouth was dry, and I couldn't speak even if I wanted to. "I know you are. I see your fancy car out front." Even scared to my core, I thought it was funny for someone to call a Corolla a fancy car. Apparently, my survival instinct includes space for jokes. "You're not from here. We both know that. So, go back to where you came from, or else we'll send you back." I wanted to grab anything I could use for a weapon, but there was nothing around me, and the room was so dark. I couldn't find anything even if I wanted to. The rain was so loud at this point. It was like white noise. It filled the spaces between us, and made the cracks of thunder seem louder than they were. "You don't belong here. Your kind is always slipping in and out, and we aim to put a stop to it. You're ruining our lives." Then he banged his hand on the door. It echoed in the room, and I couldn't help but let out a little scared yelp that only made things worse. "She's here. Help me, boys." And then all of them started kicking my door. The noise boomed in my ears. I backed into the corner of the room and curled myself into a ball. I was crying and screaming for them to leave, but they just kept kicking and kicking and kicking. "Get away from me!" I screamed over the din. "Go back to your own time." That's when the wood of the door started to splinter. I screamed as a hand broke through and undid the lock. I saw my life flash before me as the loudest crack of thunder I've ever heard shook the whole hotel. I shut my eyes and screamed. Then everything went quiet. When I opened my eyes, I was all alone in my room. The door was fine. There wasn't any rain falling. No thunder clapped. No lightning flashed. The power was on. I stood and wiped the tears from my eyes. What the hell happened? I walked over to the curtains and peered outside. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I went over to the phone and called the front desk.
Can I help you?
The older clerk said, sounding distracted by his puzzle. Has it been raining?
No, not for a few hours.
And the truck full of guys?
If they pulled into the lot, I missed them, and they didn't stay.
Then after a beat, he added,
Are you okay? Do you need to call someone for meds or something?
I just hung up the phone. I walked back to the window and looked out at the sign. It looked old and beaten up again, just like it had been when I pulled into the hotel. I decided that I couldn't stay at the check-in. I picked up my stuff and went to go check out. The older clerk looked up from his puzzle and nodded. Don't want to stay for breakfast tomorrow morning? I'm good, I said, handing back my key. My hand was jittery. He noticed. Anything wrong with the room? Yeah, no, I don't know. Maybe? Oh, okay. He said as he took the key. Can I ask you something crazy? I said, not waiting for his rejoinder. Is this place haunted or something? Haunted? Not that I'm aware of. Unless you count the number of employee dreams that have died here. Why do you ask? This sounds nuts, but a few minutes ago, someone was trying to break into my room. They kept saying I didn't belong here. I would have heard someone kicking and screaming at your door, and there wasn't anyone there. I promise. He said, go back to your own time. I added, shaking my head. What does that even mean? He stopped messing with his puzzle and looked at me square in the eyes. I don't know what is happening to you, but you're going to be okay. Sometimes, weird things happen on this long stretch of highway, but it'll be fine. You're not the first to complain about weird stuff, and you won't be the last. I had a million questions, but none of them escaped my mouth. I needed to hear that I wasn't crazy. It was a balm that soothed me. He seemed sincere. I started to cry. Hey, he said, handing me back my card. The town line is 5 miles down the interstate. Get past there, and there's a Holiday Inn. It costs more, but sometimes peace of mind does. Most people tell me things clear up around there. You okay to drive? I nodded and took back my card. I wiped the tears from my eyes and thanked him. He smiled and nodded back. Get on the road and don't look back. I will. As I walked towards the door, he called out, 9-letter word for lost, starts with M. Misplaced, I said, as I walked out of the office. When I got to my parents' house, my mom thought something might be wrong, but I covered it well. After a few weeks, I started feeling okay again, but the event was always on the frontier of my thoughts, just beyond the horizon. I knew it was there, waiting for me. At night, when I closed my eyes for bed, I can often hear the gas station clerk yelling to go back to my own time, and I shudder. I don't really tell anyone about what happened to me on that drive. It's a secret I've kept because nothing makes you sound crazier than telling people you think you may have time traveled. I figure I can share here because it's anonymous, and I'm hoping there are others out there that drove through there and felt the same. They said there were others. Are there?